A little bit of housekeeping as we get started here. Make sure you've downloaded the app. You've all been here for a few days, so I'm sure you do. But any questions that you have, field those questions through the app. And I have a helper, Jackie, who will make sure that I try to answer those questions as they come up. Who I am. My name is Bob Koch. I'm a franchise development consultant at RE/MAX. Been with RE/MAX for about just under 5 years now. And couldn't be happier with where I am and what I'm doing, and super excited to work with all of you. So, first question for all of you. Show of hands. Who likes to negotiate? Please, all of you raise your hands because you're realtors and you're in sales and you do this. Negotiation's part of the gig, right? But not everybody likes it. It can be kind of not fun. Today, we're going to be going through what is part of our Momentum training program. For those of you who are broker owners in here, and then also all of you agents who are in offices, this is a program that is available to you through your broker owner in the Momentum program. So keep that in mind as we're going through this. This is not the last time that you should see this. You should see this moving forward. Today, what we're going to talk about is not how I'm going to make you the person who's going to be able to get on The Apprentice and negotiate a deal with the Donald. It's not going to happen. The idea behind this class is to set up some foundational items and to reiterate what you already know about the negotiation process, okay? So some of the expectations today, basic concepts of negotiation, kind of highlight that already. An awareness of the objectives and how to successfully navigate each stage of a negotiation. Because as we know, negotiation isn't a one and done thing. There's multiple pieces, multiple stages to it. Talk about the framework of navigating negotiations on the buying side and the selling side, because it's different, right? There are different things that we have to work through, different circumstances, and each one of those is unique, and they tie together. So we're going to go through that. And then finally, we're going to look at some of those tactics, some of those little things that get thrown out there to try to get you off your game, and in turn you use to get your counterparty off of their game. So we're going to talk about what some of those look like and how we're going to be able to work against those moving forward and give the best possible service that we can to our clients. Another part of this is to lay out what we're looking for as a result. Maximizing our closings, maximizing those opportunities, and again, giving our customers the best possible service they can get. We're going to talk through the negotiation theory, understanding the building blocks of what it looks like and how we do that. Talk about the buyer negotiation, the seller negotiation, and then finally those tactics. So, negotiation theory. We got some key concepts. We have our positions, and our positions are, this is where we establish where everybody is. This is kind of the nuts and bolts of what your buyer or seller has. This is the facts. This is why they're doing it. How many of you have read any of Simon Sinek's books? Start with why. Positions are the why for your clients, okay? It's establishing what they're doing this for. And I think this is a critical piece in this whole planning stage, because you might have a client who is selling and getting into a position because they have made money, they have equity, they're looking to upgrade. Or in some of these strange times, we're going to have some circumstances coming up where people might be losing their homes, right? And we have to understand that the negotiation around a short sale or a foreclosure or somebody who's on the verge of losing their home is going to be very different than that of somebody who has made money on their house, okay? Then we're going to get into the interests. The interests are those different things. It's what they have lined up within these. It's the different items that they're looking for. It's also going to come into where their resources are. You'll have an understanding of what kind of money your buyer has. What do they have to work with? What's kind of that top line? What's the bottom line? What they're trying to do, okay? Then we're going to get into the zone of agreement. The zone of agreement is where the buying side and the selling side cross paths, and we're able to draw a circle there. And within that zone of agreement, that's where we know a deal is going to happen. So, positions. It's, like I said, it's the what in the negotiation. The interests of your client. Those are going to be the idea of where do you want, what kind of house are you looking for? You want a ranch? You want a 2-story, beach house, a bungalow, what that might look like. So that's one part of it. Then we're going to understand, okay, how much do we want to spend? As a buyer, what's your top line? As a buyer, your top line is your bottom line, right? Your top dollar that you're willing to spend is the bottom line of where you're willing to go. So, we establish, we can afford 325,000, but we'd really like to be at 300,000. Okay, so we start establishing where those workaround points are. Also, within the interest aspect of this is very much an internal thing with your clients in that negotiation piece, and we want to make sure that we set the tone of a negotiation around a house isn't an all or nothing kind of thing. How many of you have bought a new car recently, or a car in general? When you walk on the lot and you see the sticker on the window and it said $40,000, you don't start busting out hundreds and say, I want to pay $40,000. You come in and you say, I think this is worth $30,000. And then the negotiation starts. You have the same thing with home buying and selling, and it's important to set that tone with your consumer, okay? The ultimate goal around positions is to really understand your client and be able to maximize the value that they're going to be getting from you and from the deal. Our interests. This is another situation where we start digging even a little bit deeper and we understand the underlying things that somebody is looking for. I would venture to guess that everybody in this room has dealt with a client who one of their most important things is the school that's around the house. What school district am I in? Okay? Or what amenities are around me, because I don't want to drive 10 miles to go to the golf course. I want to be, 5 minutes from the golf course. Maybe I want to live in a golf cart community. So this is where we start understanding those reasons and those values. And then secondly, the motivations. I'm going to give you a real world example of myself. I'm currently moving to South Carolina. One of those motivations for me, I want to be close to the beach. So you have to understand what those different things are. And then we also have to understand that some of those other maybe not so controllable factors they have, what is that person's job? Are they getting moved because of their job? Are they getting relocated to an area because their job says, hey, you're getting promoted, you're doing awesome, but I'm taking you from, Denver, Colorado to Oklahoma City. I'm sorry for any of you in Oklahoma. There's nothing wrong with Oklahoma City. It's just an easy example. But, it's you then have to find that balance of, okay, they had this here and they're looking for some of those similar things. So how do I, as a realtor, understand what those different things are and understand those motivations for everybody? Okay. A lot of times these aren't outwardly expressed. This is your job in there to ask those inquisitive questions, to dig a little bit deeper, to understand what might be going on internally. If they're not going to volunteer them, you got to dig them out. And ultimately, this particular part of the planning stage is going to be very helpful for you in providing the best possible service. The bottom line. This is the minimum agreement. Right? I talked about it for just a minute when we were talking about a buyer, and their bottom line is going to be the highest dollar they're willing to pay. And on the selling side of it, the bottom line is going to be the lowest number they're going to take. We're going to have positions that fall along each of those lines, and hopefully we can get something to line up. And within that zone of agreement, typically a deal will happen. Now, if there is no zone of agreement, and I'll have a graphic here shortly, it's you have to have the tough conversation of it's time to walk away, or this isn't the right deal because there isn't a maximization of value. There isn't enough benefit to both parties. Okay? And again, that zone of agreement. So that's, like I said, it's when those bottom lines connect. So, first arrow. We have our starting position. We have our bottom line. So like I said, that starting position might be $300,000, and the bottom line might be $325 is the highest I'll go. Okay? On the selling side, we have our starting position. We have our home listed at $325,000. Our bottom line might be 300,000. The goal is to create the zone of agreement. Within this particular position, as we get further into it, we'll talk about the contingency aspect. We'll talk about the different exceptions and inclusions and different things like that that will help us fall into that zone of agreement. But this is what we're hoping for. What we don't want to happen and we don't want to hang ourselves up on is when a deal will not happen. So here, we don't have it lining up. No zone of agreement. Who in here is guilty of trying to force something that wasn't supposed to happen? It's no fun, right? Because you've already put a lot of effort in. You've worked your tail off for your side. You've probably worked for the other side. I mean, we are RE/MAX agents, so a lot of times we're doing both ends of the deal without getting paid for both ends of the deal. So you've worked really hard, but there is a point where you have to say, I'm not maximizing the value for my customer. It's not the right decision. That's what happens here. I will say that in this, a deal won't happen. A deal could happen, but it's not a good deal. So keep that in mind. So the stage of the negotiation, preparation. I would argue from the sales careers that I've had, from the different things that I do, from working with buyers and buying and selling agents, that preparation is more important than probably anything that you can possibly do. If you want to be a good negotiator, you have to know your client, right? And you have to prepare ahead of time. And you prepare your client too, okay? Have that conversation and tee it up and say, these are the things that are going to happen. What we're talking about here applies to every market and every type of market. We just have to make subtle shifts either direction, okay? Now we're going to talk about the discovery piece. Discovery is where you as agents flex the question asking muscle, because you're going to the counterparty agent, you're going to the listing agent or the buying agent, and you're asking questions and you're finding out what's important to them, what's not important. You're working trying to where their bottom line is and understand, can we make this happen? Okay, bargaining. We get in here, but bargaining is the fun part, right? I think a lot of you live for it. My father-in-law is a RE/MAX agent, and he's that guy who goes to Mexico and he barters with everybody. He'll be at the restaurant bartering for no reason, but he loves the bargaining piece, right? That's where we start working on those different things. Do I get the hot tub with the house? Do I get the TV? That's where that piece, it's the, if you will, it's the sexy part of it, okay? And then the closing. The closing is where we tackle that emotional gratitude piece. That's where we get our clients the euphoria of, we got a great deal. We got what we wanted. We feel good. We made this happen. So in the preparation stage, it's our information gathering. Like I said, a lot of times your client isn't going to volunteer some information, and it's important to ask those questions. What school districts? Are parks important to you? Do you have dogs? Do you want land? Is the cost of water important to you? You have to start digging up those things and planning and understanding what that looks like so that you can get a solid understanding. The fact of the matter is, I'm a millennial. I just bought a new house. Before I even stepped foot on an airplane to fly to South Carolina, my wife and I had probably looked at 5,000 homes. And that's an exaggeration because there isn't that much inventory. However, we already had a pretty good preconceived notion of what we were looking for. But what we didn't know is all the stuff that you are all experts in, and you have to develop those different things. So it's understanding, well, you like this house, it looks beautiful, but I don't know if you're gonna like this neighborhood. Here are the different things that are associated with it. It doesn't have the walking trails. It doesn't have, the school is a long ways away. And, it's really not a great school. And I know that you have 3 kids. So for you, you're going to come in knowing what kind of house, the style for the most part, because they're going to give you a list from realtor.com or Zillow, heaven forbid. And you're going to have an idea of what they're looking for. Now you ask the questions to dig into the other pieces of it and find out what is really important. On the same token, within understanding what's important, you have to develop strategies around that. And those strategies revolve around how do we prioritize the importance of things, okay? Strategizing the importance is really is critical, because this is what helps us in the negotiation game as far as where our bottom line falls and what are those pieces in the middle that allow us some leverage as the give and take. Okay. Also within this, on that planning side, we talked about interest here for just a minute. Resources. How much money do you have? How many of you have had clients come to you and said, well, the bank approved me for $500,000? And as a realtor, you're like, oh, that's great. That gives me some pretty good flexibility. But then when they start actually breaking down what a $500,000 mortgage looks like, nope, can't pay for that. That's well over half of my income a month. That doesn't make any sense. So you start whittling down, and you have to understand the resources they have. This market is nuts. I don't care where you are. Low inventory, higher than ever prices, and offers. Has anybody here actually been able to sell a home to a buyer without having multiple offers on the table this year? Probably a few of you, but not as many as it used to be. The market is very competitive right now. So within the resource piece, we're looking at how much cash do you have? On top of what you can get, how much cash do you have? Because that becomes a big critical piece of what we have going on. And then finally, the target. You should be asking every one of your clients, what would make a deal a 10 out of 10 for you? What would make it a 10 out of 10? And it's very fortuitous that I'm giving this presentation, given what I've gone through. A 10 for 10 for me was, we have enough bedrooms to house all of our kids' own room, because my daughters do not want to share a room anymore. I have a workspace, I have an office, I have a garage, because obviously I want to do man things in the garage. But a 10 out of 10 in the neighborhood was, I have a smaller yard, which I wasn't a fan of. We got a private lake in the neighborhood. So there are different things. There are going to be compromises. You have to understand what is going to make this optimal for everybody. Okay? So developing strategies helps you better understand the negotiation points. These are the prioritized as must-haves, nice-to-haves, and trade-offs. Your initial strategy should include refining, starting, and secondary positions, as well as walk-away terms. So I highlighted the prioritization a couple of slides ago. But again, this is where it's really important. The realtors that actually helped me in South Carolina are sitting in this room, and they worked with my wife a lot more because my wife is the boss. However, there are certain things that are very critical to me, and we came to the table and said, these are what we want. And we worked through with our agents, what are the must-haves? I must have a garage. I must have a yard that my dog can run around in and my children can run around in. And I must have a workspace. Those were for me. My wife was, I must have a nice kitchen that I don't have to renovate like the last one. I must have the space for the children. I must have you have a workspace so that you're not in my way all the time. And what that means is we were able to establish those couple of items that overlapped, and those become the must-haves. When there is that coincision of what your buyers have, that's the must-have. And then you get to the nice-to-haves. It would be nice to have a 3-car garage. But if I don't have a 3-car garage, a 2-car with a finished basement would be okay. Or, it'd be nice to have an acre, but I'll take half an acre if it backs up to green space. Whatever that might look like, you want to prioritize those different items and understand where it falls and how you can create and the distinction between the must have, the need to have, and the want to have, what's nice to have, okay? And then finally, walk away terms. What do we walk away from? When you walk into a house, you're walking down the hall and you feel the floor dip, you're like, yeah, your structural issues, probably a walk away term, right? There's a reason we do inspections, and granted, some people are waiving inspections these days, as crazy as that might be. That's why we do inspections, right? Having the conversation with your clients and understanding what they are comfortable with on certain things and what it looks like to walk away. This market and the level of inventory, walking away is probably one of the hardest things for people to do, because if they walk away, they're wondering when they're going to see another opportunity. So it's important to do that, though, because again, we want to strive for a 10 for 10 deal. And if they don't walk away because of something that is major and then they're stuck with that, the chances of them having to move away from that sooner than they expected is higher. And all of your businesses are built on referrals and repeat business. We would hate to have them feel like, well, my agent didn't steer me right, and I'm not going to use them again because they let me buy this house where the foundation was falling in, and it wasn't your fault because you probably actually said, hey, this is not a good idea, but they didn't listen, right? So we really do have to work hard to kind of persuade them to go the right direction. Discovery. This is probably one of those areas where you have to get clever. You might get a little bit uncomfortable, but this is where you're trying to find out what the counterparty has going on. Whether you're on the buyer side or the seller side, you're trying to establish what's important to them. We'll talk about it here in a minute, and we'll have a graphic that talks about it, but ultimately, for your client, you know what's important to them. You want to find out what is important to the counterparty as well, and you want to understand where that dichotomy falls, because the goal would be to be able to trade off something of low importance to the counterparty for something that's high importance to your client. That's where we're going to be getting into that zone of agreement, is when those trade-offs start happening, okay? You want to learn as many facts as you can about your counterparty. Again, there you're going to run into well, if you want to know something, send me an offer. And that happens, right? But ultimately, you can ask questions. You can start to dig different things up and understand. Asking questions about the property. Hey, tell me about this kitchen that they redid. They did it 2 years ago. What are some of the things that they, are really proud of about it? They'll tell you those things, but you want to try to dig up as much information as you can, okay? Bargaining. This is, as all of you know, this is that stage. This is where the rubber meets the road. This is where we're trading this. It's the horse trading aspect of this. It's this for that. It's, well, what if we do this and you guys do that? Or there's so many different opportunities within the bargaining stage, but it really revolves around that trade-off of wants, must-haves, nice-to-haves, right? And that's on both sides of it. This is where we're trying to determine what's of low importance to the counterparty and high importance to us, and we can make a swap and everybody feels good, and there's this mutual benefit that comes out of it. This process typically consists of the offer, counter offers, concessions, and contingencies. We're going to talk a little more about each one of those, but we don't get to go into the bargaining stage until there's an offer placed. Okay? And all of you know that. And the market now is actually very challenging in some circumstances. I've lived in a place where I was fortunate enough to say, you can come see our house for this weekend, and on Monday we're taking best and final offers. That type of negotiation becomes very hard. But the premise behind it is that you are submitting an offer, and once that offer is accepted, then we start the rest of the process, right? Because then you're going to order an inspection, and we're going to get into the new piece. Okay, I found this in the inspection. We'd like to have a conversation. Okay. Or, I want this house, I've got this offer, and I've got the financing, but it's contingent upon my house selling. So what does that look like? So a lot of things that we're going to work on through that. Your attention should go towards the client's objectives and interests. So again, you're obviously focused on your client and what they need and what they want, and looking at where those different trade-offs come in. Where appropriate, a concession plan can help bridge the gap towards a mutually agreed upon outcome. Example on my house. We did an inspection when we moved in, and I went through and I fixed everything on that inspection, all the safety items, and I took care of those things because I felt like that was a priority. That paid off. And when the offer we accepted, the deal was is that they wanted us to fix any, after the inspection, you fix any health and safety items, and any repairs over $1,000 we want you to take care of. Well, in the back of my mind, I knew the gutters needed to be done because I didn't feel like getting up on the roof and dealing with that. So they came back and they said, we want you to do the gutters. A couple of different ways you can go on that, right? What does that concession plan look like? Is it you have a friend who's a contractor and they'll do the new gutters for you for $500? Yeah, maybe you go that route. Or I don't want to slow this process. I want to make this as painless as possible. I'm going to give you $1,500 to do the gutters yourself, and we'll close this deal. That's the direction that we went. But that's the kind of concession conversations you want to be having with your clients and preparing them for ahead of time. This will come up. If this comes up, here are the strategies that we can employ in this. Gain the agreement from your client. And then closing. Closing stage has a higher psychological impact result of the negotiation. Like I said, most people, when they buy a home, when they close on probably what is the biggest purchase of most of their lives, they are grinning ear to ear. They're ready to carry their significant other over the threshold. It's going to be this great euphoric thing until they start deciding to paint and move in, but that's beside the point. You want to make sure that in that closing room that everything is going smoothly. Nothing comes up, there's no surprises, but also as agents and as representatives for your clients, it is really, really important for you to help them understand that the process right before you sign, there are still certain things that could come up, and always keep them prepared. Communication is absolutely critical through this entire process. Develop a plan to close the remaining gap together. If you're getting close to closing and there's still little things that are coming up, and it's almost like that nitpicky nickel dime kind of things, I'm sure everybody has worked on that, worked through those. Continue to try to find those alternatives. Think outside of the box. Cut a deal with the other agent and say, hey, what if we split this? What if we split this repair? The inspection said that it's okay, but your client's not happy. We want to make this happen. We don't want to pay for all of it. Let's split the difference. Think outside of the box. What creates a win-win? What creates a circumstance where somebody gets what they're wanting? They have to pay a little skin in the game, but they feel more committed to it. And your client, sure, they might lose a little bit, but at the end of the day, the deal still goes through, and they don't have to start the 30, 45-day cycle again. Nobody wants to be all the way through a deal, have it fall through, and then have to call the cleaner again, get your house tidied back up, put this back out, put that back out, move the boxes that you've already started packing and put them away so that your house is presentable, and then vacate for a weekend while your house is intruded by people and do the whole thing again. Nobody wants to do that. So continue to think outside of the box and ensure that that doesn't happen. It's also really important for you to help temper the emotions of your client. And when I say temper the emotions of a client, most of us, when we're doing this, the home buying process is exciting and we see something and we're like, oh my God, I love this kitchen, I have to have the house. But there's other things that are going to be going into this. So as agents, you say, I'm so thrilled that you love this house and I think we can start making a deal happen on this. But just remember, we got to consider, we have an inspection coming up. We got to make sure that all of this was done on the up and up, right? Sure that, it's working appropriately. Temper those expectations. And at the end of the day too, we want to make sure that we're paying attention to other things that might be going on. The listing agent or the buying agent is going to put out some different cues that you as an agent will say, oh, all right, that seems a little bit fishy. And it's your job to help protect your client and make sure that their eagerness is fostered, but also you're paying attention to what's happening on the other end, because that's all very helpful, if you will, ammunition in the negotiation process and understanding that your client's getting a 10 for 10 and we hit that zone of agreement. So here's a quick graphic for this. This presentation is also in the app. So if you want to take pictures, go for it, but you do have this in the app. This is what the stage is. This is what it looks like. You prep. This is going to take the longest. It's going to be the most time consuming. It can be really fun. It can be really horrible. But it is very important in setting up the negotiation process. Discovery. Finding out what's important when you've gotten to the point of, I have located an opportunity and I want to tackle it. Finding out what the counterparty wants, needs, what that looks like. Then we bargain, okay? And then finally, we want to get this closed. We want to make sure that we're coming up with a win-win situation for both parties. So, a little bit of real world. Buyer negotiation. So we do the same thing. We're going to gather information, prioritize the interests of our clients, refine the positions, and clarify the bottom line. Here's an example of a script. I'm not going to read it, but you want to have specific conversations ready to go. You want to have, whether you do a script or you have a specific set of bullet points that you work through with every client, you want to make sure that you're asking them the questions to understand what your client values, what drives them, what they're able to do, what they're willing to do. And you're going to get that in those different situations, in this situation here, by actually having an initial plan put in place. You want to make sure in these conversations too that you're teeing up the prioritization right off the bat. Because what that helps you do is refine what they've already brought you. A buyer has brought you 15 properties. You've reviewed all of them. You've taken your notes. You understand what each one of them are. You know the neighborhood. You know the schools. You know that they're in a floodplain. They're not floodplain. They're close to a major road. You have all these things, and what you want to do is have that conversation with the buyer and say, okay, what is important to you? You know, you've got half of the houses here are stucco houses and half of them are wood-sided houses. Is either one of these an actual priority to you? No, we don't care. Cool, you can leave that in that bucket. Okay, this is in this school district, this is in this school district. Oh, we need to be in this school district. So you get the rest, get rid of the other ones. So you're clarifying, you're honing that in, you're getting to a point where you know exactly what your client needs. And you're prioritizing what's important. And you lay it all out. And ultimately, the third, fourth, fifth level important items, those are the items that when we get into the negotiation piece, those are the first ones that we use as our bargaining chips. And the goal and the hope is that level chips are what's important on the seller side for them to make the deal happen. So it's a trade-off of what's important to them and less important to your buyer client. And then obviously we want to always refine and clarify what they're doing. How many times have you been working with a client, you've gone through a similar process to this, and then a week later, they're like, I think we want to be in a house that's about half the size we've been looking at. We just did all this stuff. Like, you're going to have to do this. You want to continue to make sure that you're doing that because that changes your whole process. And to some degree, it might open up opportunities for more inventory, but it also might open up just so you know, I'm going to prepare you ahead of time. This size, this price range, we are going to have to be very competitive because you're going to be in a multiple offer situation. And this is where we start teeing up those expectations of this is what it's going to look like. Again, here's our buyer starting position, secondary position, third position. Always clarify the bottom line. I'm the guy who gets a gift card for Christmas and I go into the store to spend it and I get buyer's anxiety with a gift card. It's not even my money. This will happen with your buyers as well. You want to continue to clarify and refine that this is where you want to be. We're looking at this because you just sent me a house that's over this number. I want to make sure that we're still on the same page. Okay? Discovery stage. So we're looking to understand what the seller's interests are. Big part of this is asking questions. Initially, that's all you can do. And like I said, a lot of them aren't going to give you a lot. They're going to say, well, bring an offer to the table and we'll talk. Okay? By inquiring on what's going on, by going in and viewing a home and taking notes of specific things that your buyers thought were great, it allows you to go in and ask a clarifying question. Whether you know the answer or not, you ask a clarifying question around a remodel piece. You ask a clarifying question around how many square feet the garage is, or different things like that. And you can start a conversation through that point. We want to dig up as much information as we can before we put an offer in. Rubber meets the road. Again, bargaining, I think a lot of times we associate negotiation only with bargaining. A lot of times we think that negotiation is only the back and forth. The only time that bargaining is back and forth is in an auction house, and it's really not bargaining anyway, right? You're just putting a number out there and it's the highest bid. What you're doing is trying to identify the best possible outcome for your client and also a circumstance where the seller feels good about what they've done, okay? Be prepared here. The tools that you have, doing your CMAs, looking at the neighborhoods, looking at all the secondary positions that your buyer might have, those are all the very important things to have in this particular circumstance so that when you are having conversations, you can go back to your client and say, hey, this is what they said. Here is my opinion based on the conversation we had. By doing the preparation ahead of time, it allows you to maintain that expectation and always tie back to, this is the conversation we had. How many times have you all heard, well, you didn't tell me that? It's like, we talked about this. And we're going to talk about it again now because obviously I need to clarify this position with you. okay? And then our timing. Timing is a big piece of this. Who here right now feels like every buyer you have is in the biggest rush of their life to put an offer in? They walk through the front door, I want to put an offer in. What? You haven't seen anything. Yeah, but I want to put an offer in. That instant gratification is part of this process, right? It's that emotional happiness. They feel this euphoria. But at the same time, it is important to make sure that you see everything, what it may or may not look like, and depending on the market and where you are, the understanding of what kind of timing you have to have is important. So the conversations that you have and everything too, it allows you to set up the respective urgency that you need to have to be able to help tee up everything. In the bargaining stage, we're going to have the concessions. We know what the price is. We know what is there. We know where we want to go, what we want to be at. So we're able to work within that. Terms. Am I a zero down FHA loan, first time home buyer? Am I a 20% down conventional home buyer? Where do I fall in this? Am I an all cash buyer? What are the terms of the deal? Okay, so that's an important piece to think about. What does that look like? And on the buyer side, this allows you to help them be competitive too and say, this is where you're at, this is what you're doing, this is where I think we're going to have the most leverage. Dates and timeline, we talked about that. What does the timing look like? How does that happen? Are you selling your previous house? Know that we've now set a 30-day clock. Is it going to happen in that 30-day clock, 45-day clock? Exclusions and exclusions. Do I get to keep the refrigerator? Can I get a hot tub? What are we going to get out of this deal, right? What's included? What's excluded? I'm taking the refrigerator. Okay, so I have to plan now for $2,000. For some buyers, that $2,000 is like, oh, no way, I'm walking away from this. So understanding those particular things are really important as well. And then obviously the contingencies, we talked about that. I have to sell my house. Or this deal happens once seller says, I have another house that I want to buy. So you can put an offer in, but you have to wait until I find a new house. There are so many different things that are going on, and this is where you have to navigate and negotiate through those different things. And then we get into the conversation of, oh, well, I'm going to do a month of rent back. Thinking outside of the box, which that's not really outside of the box, but thinking about what that's going to look like and preparing your client for it. Again, the goal is to maximize the value for your client. Negotiation is about getting the most for your client and making them feel like they got a 10 out of 10. So let's talk about the seller side. Look at that, the same slide. Because guess what, we're doing same things, just on the seller aspects of it. We're going to get all the information. We're going to ask them, what do you like about your house? Why is this house important to you? What are the key features? Tell me about this. What have you done to it that makes it spectacular? Understanding those aspects. That's that information that helps you get into the negotiation piece when a buyer comes. Prioritizing the interests. Again, that falls in line with what is important to the seller. Yeah, they can have the hot tub. Or no, that hot tub is brand new and we have a new place for it in the house that we're looking at, and there is no way that I'm giving that up. It falls in line with the prioritization because ultimately the buyer side is going to come in and try to pick off the high importance items that fall in line with their low importance items. Refining positions and clarifying the bottom line, I think with the seller are probably two of the most important things. And we're going to get into it. But the market as it stands is very unique because I think we know that we can get a full price offer almost all the time, and in many circumstances over. But how many of you, by show of hands, would argue that it's not all about the money? Can't be only about the almighty dollar. Within the Momentum program, this is where this falls as well, like I had mentioned earlier, you're going to be asking pre-listing questions. You're going to go in asking them what these different things are, what they're looking for. You're going to have those bullet points, so you're going to understand those. You're going to set your different appointments. You're going to have a listing agreement ready to go. Everything is going to be laid out. And it's critical that you show your intent to be the best possible representative for them by being on time, being punctual, same thing, sorry, being prepared. We're going to ask the same question. What would make a 10 out of 10 for you? What part of this would get you a 10 out of 10? You want a seller to walk away feeling good. And a lot of times, the person that you're listing their home for, unless they're moving out of state, you were likely helping them find, and they're leveraging on the buying side of this as well. So it's really important that you're 10 out of 10ing on both sides of this deal. So you're asking a lot of the same questions, and you're trying to help them understand what is realistic, but you're also trying to understand what they want and what they really need. Again, we're going to refine and understand. It's the same thing, with the buyers. They say, well, I just saw this house that's this much. Well, on our listing side, well, I'm not going to budge on that. Like, oh, but we had a conversation at the beginning of this that said this was a negotiable item. What has changed? You want to refine and clarify those different points. So we have our starting position. We base this off of the price to begin with. We have our listing price. We have what's the secondary. And that secondary isn't necessarily a reduction in price, but it could be a shifting of value, what they're willing to move in the circumstance. Whether it is we're willing to leave the hot tub, the trampoline, and the golf cart. Because that's a real thing in South Carolina. I found out that you can buy a house with a golf cart already. So you start looking at those different things, and ultimately, we're trying to make sure that we don't go all the way to the bottom line, but we find a real happy medium where everybody feels good and it feels like you got the most value with the least amount of stress. Because that's why sellers come to you. Nobody really wants to do a FSBO. Selling a home on your own is hard work. And usually you end up working with an agent anyway because the buyer that comes in is an agent, has an agent attached to them. They want this to be as stress-free as possible. So that preparation stage and getting all those different aspects together is what helps align you so you know that that's happening appropriately. And again, clarifying the bottom line. Here's an example of a script. But be transparent. Be honest. I want to make sure that you are happy where we are and I understand your bottom line. Ask that question. Get that validation. In this circumstance, as a seller, I think you have more flexibility when you have a buyer who's interested in digging up information. Because as a seller, on the listing agent side of it, you can ask those questions and really dig in and say, okay, your buyer's interested. What does your buyer want to know? Well, they want to know about this, this, and this. Perfect. Here's what these particular items are. you can divulge the right amount of information. It's kind of like a game of chess. It's a little bit of give and take. I'm going to move the bishop here and move the knight here, okay? And then this is also where we're going to be identifying those really key features. Remember we were talking about how we want to identify what's important here and look at what's most important to least important? Well, you're going to have that too on what's least important to most important. And maybe, I keep going back to the hot tub, and I don't know why, but maybe the hot tub is not important to you at all, but the buyer's like, God, we would love to have that hot tub. Well, your seller might just be like, yep, perfect. They can have the hot tub within this offer. Or, yeah, the seller would be willing to leave the hot tub. I think you guys should, submit your offer and we'll see what that looks like. But again, it's a trade-off of something that's of low importance to high importance to somebody else. If your client is not satisfied with an offer, your job will be to move them in the direction of the zone of agreement. The emotions of getting an offer is similar to that of submitting an offer and getting a house. There's excitement, there's trepidation, there's stress, and ultimately we want to see an offer that everybody is happy and excited about. But when it comes in and it's not like that, this is where you as agents sit down and say, okay, we got this offer. I know you don't like it, but let's look at it first before we say pound sand. Here's what they're looking for. What would you like to counter with? What are the issues that you have with their offer? Where can we shift in our positions to get to a zone of agreement situation? Because you know as well as I do, they're negotiating on their side too. That's where this bargaining aspect of it comes into play. Leveraging your different positions is what's really important here. We're doing the same thing that we did with the buyers. Clarifying that price and getting it set. Is it in line with the market? Does the price that I want to list at justify that marketplace? What are the terms? Are they coming to me with an FHA and I want to help a first-time home buyer, or I have no interest in dealing with something that might fall through and I want a conventional or a cash buyer? Dates and timelines. Getting the inspection done quickly and timely so that you as a seller have time to fix things if you so choose to fix things, or you can address different things. Or, maybe there's something in the inspection that comes up and you're like, I need to back out of this. Inclusion, exclusions, back to the hot tub again. Is it included, is excluded? What's there? Figuring out those opportunities and where your client may be willing to go. And then finally, our contingencies. Is the buyer selling their other home and they are not able to buy your home until they close on their other home? It's a very real thing. Concessions we're always looking for a win-win opportunity. The trade-off of minor to major. Okay? We want to create this atmosphere where everybody feels like they got something that works for them and works well. So let's talk about tactics. And I'll be curious to see if I'm watching out here to see smiles, to see if anybody uses some of these different things. And whether you know them by this name, but you'll understand what they are when we talk about it. But the first one, concession guilt. It's designed to force unwanted compromise from the counterparty. How do we handle that? Here's the example that I have here for this one. I already came down on my price. Your client should pay all closing costs. I'm pretty sure every one of you has heard that at least 5 times a year for the last however long you've been a realtor. You stick to where you are. You look at where your positions are with your client. And you don't just give in to things, right? There's going to be some give and take on this. And maybe that is a reasonable thing. Maybe it is reasonable that that happens. But before you as an agent just say, okay, yeah, we'll do that, you have a conversation with your client and you say, this is where they're at right now. What do you want to do? Well, I'm not paying closing costs. Okay, I understand that. And I'm more than happy to go back, but understand that may cause this deal to go south. Are you willing to walk away over closing costs? Clarify, understand, refine what the positions are. Extreme anchors employed to slant the relative starting point of a negotiation. So this is one that I don't think in general we're dealing with too much in this market, purely because we are low on inventory and things are already priced very high, and it's kind of like the expectation I'm going to pay a higher price. But this is where a buyer would come in and say a house is listed for $400,000, and they come in and say $250,000. We all know that's not reasonable. And although you are legally obligated to take that to your client, they're going to be pissed, right? Emotions get during that. The goal behind this is that they are trying to shift your seller's starting point. They're trying to shift the bottom line. They're trying to move that zone of agreement into their favor. And ultimately, what would you do? You know, that offer is just not going to work for my client. We've discussed it, and it's not reasonable. And at that point, too, you're not saying, bring me another offer. You're just saying, it's not reasonable. And at that point, they can have the ball in their court. Because the chances are you're probably going to have other offers at this point. Misdirection and bluffs. Concealing or exaggerating facts in order to skew the narrative of what deemed fair. You didn't tell me this house was in a floodplain. No, it's on the seller's disclosure right here. I think I spelled everything right. This is another one of those tactics where they're trying to throw you off of your game. They're trying to shift the position, trying to identify ways where they can make a better deal for their client. So you're not going to fault them for that. But for you, you come back with the fact-based response. We actually did disclose this on the seller's disclosure. It's, in line 7A under this and that. And you can point right to it where it was written down. Okay? Use your information. This is not one of those places where you want to get frustrated and huffy, like, I'm down. I see what you're saying, but we did write that down. It's right here. Threats and warnings to heighten the counterparty's emotional state and cloud decision making. Again, this is another one of those ones where they're trying to get under the seller's skin. If you don't accept this offer, I'm walking away. Okay, well, I don't get to make that decision. My seller does. I'll get back to you. Review it. And maybe the offer is good enough that it's like, yeah, sure. But if they're willing to walk away over it, maybe it wasn't meant to be. These kinds of situations say zone of agreement can't happen. So that's one of those areas where these particular tactics are designed to foster emotional response and throw you off of your game. The best you can do in these circumstances is to keep your cool, use facts, and take it back to your client and have a pragmatic conversation and refine their positions and clarify and see where everything is at. Unreciprocated offers. Counterparty requests concessions before making a counteroffer. Who's had that happen? I want you to give me this and this and this, and I'll give you an offer if you give me those things. Well, that's not how this game is played, right? a listing, when you're a seller, when your seller is selling probably what is one of their biggest investments in their life, if not the biggest investment in their life, the buyer is buying what could be the biggest investment in their life. So we have to take that into consideration. But at the end of the day, there has to be that reciprocation of communication and an initial starting spot. Got to start somewhere, and there has to be some sort of an offer associated with that before anybody should be willing to give up or give into anything. Urgency. Design scarcity and elicit concessions for your client. This is probably one of the most real things happening right now, and I don't think that it's one where it has to be forced. Inventory is an issue across the country. So there is a sense of urgency that all buyers have right now because of this, and all sellers actually have this as a leverage point. Well, if you don't make me an offer, or you don't accept this offer, I have 3 people waiting in the wings. This is a very real tactic, and I think in this current marketplace, this is one that throws people off very, very greatly because it creates that scarcity. You don't know if there's going to be something else better coming up or something else even equivalent coming up. Again, the best way to handle this is to focus on what you already clarified with your buyer and seller and help them understand what all of this looks like. Because there are going to be certain things on an urgency level that you can't change. When you go to get a mortgage, just because the seller says, well, you need to do it this much faster, doesn't mean that the bank is going to say, sure, we'll close 18 days early. That's not how it works. So some of that may not be reasonable. Irrational decision makers. I've been one of those before, not going to lie. But again, usually what happens here is that there's just a lack of information. They don't really know there's underlying issues. There are unspoken things that you don't know about. Got to dig those different things up, and with them, you're just giving them facts. You're helping them get to the point of actually understanding and diffusing that situation. Remember, offers are rarely non-negotiable. It's important to understand that. There's always room to go one direction or another. There's always an opportunity, especially in real estate, to create a win-win circumstance, to have some trade-off, have some give and take. It's never all or nothing. There's always going to be something. All of these strategies, I'm sure many of you are sitting in here and be like, man, this is just a refresher on what I do every day. And I hope that that's the case. My challenge to you is to think about what we talked about today. Go in and look at the presentation. Think about your current strategies and say, you know, what can I improve on? What can I add a little bit more to my arsenal? How can I leverage this idea of, you know, planning? Maybe I need to plan better with my clients. Maybe this is an opportunity for me to create a CRM system that I can better tee up how my clients want to work. Take points of this. Like I said, you guys aren't going to be going on the apprentice now and negotiating a big deal. That wasn't the goal. The goal was to help you have some more of these fundamentals, put some things into perspective so that you can make small adjustments in your business and hopefully win you some more deals, especially if you work with a lot of buyers. Right now, negotiation is key, and the concession and the give and take aspect is very, very critical. Don't forget to give a rating in the app. You can ask me questions. Jackie, did any questions come in? Oh, perfect. I'm going to take that as I did an okay job. Thank you all very much. I appreciate it. Ooh, got a question in the back. This one. Good morning, everybody. How are we? I have to admit something. I've been doing trainings at...
Okay, that is that class. I will get this uploaded to Facebook here in just a little bit. So I hope you guys enjoyed that. There's definitely some good information in there. It is definitely negotiating season. So I will see you guys next time.